Welcome to TD SYNNEX's 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Welcome everyone to this next episode of 30 Minutes with a Hacker. My name is Jade Witte with the Security Solutions Group here at TD SYNNEX. And with me here today, as we've had pretty regularly now, we have both Brett Scott, who is our resident ethical hacker, and Alex Ryals. I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourselves real quick and we'll get into this discussion. Brett, maybe start with you.
My name is Brett Scott. I am a director level here at TD SYNNEX, and I oversee the Tech Data Cyber Range. I have more than 20 years serving as essentially on the front lines of cyber warfare.
Hey guys, Jade, thanks again for having me on the podcast. My name is Alex Ryals, and I lead our global security practice here at TD SYNNEX, which basically means we're making sure that we take care of our partners equally across all the regions, providing them consistent solutions in each of our regions around cybersecurity and making sure that our partners can service their end customers with a good portfolio of vendor technology. So thanks for having me.
I'm excited about the discussion today as we're going to get into the new year. It's a time that we often reflect or start looking at what the future holds. And got some interesting predictions that we're seeing for 2022. And some of our research and what we're seeing in the market, state CIOs are prioritizing cybersecurity as the #1 priority in 2022, followed by digital governance and broadband. The modernization of legacy platforms and applications ranks 5th after placing 7th last year, while consolidation and optimization takes the 10th spot. What I thought was really telling when I was reading this report is that budget and cost control did not make the list for the first time since 2008. So we're seeing a big shift in the industry. People are realizing the importance of allocating budget to cybersecurity. Also in Dark Reading, which is an online publication that is really good, they had some of their biggest concerns and predictions. They're saying 2022, we're gonna see system compromise, ransomware, and DDoS attacks are gonna be the biggest concerns that we need to look out for. So I was also mentioning that, you know, the increase in budgets, we're seeing it's going to about 15% of IT budgets. That's what they're allocating for security right now. Whereas last year it was about 10%. So we're seeing a big uptick in 2022. But based upon what I was stating, if there's a large enough risk, executives are likely going to pull resources from other areas to spend more in cybersecurity when it's necessary. So we're really seeing that trend. We came up with some predictions that we want to cover as a group and step through those. And the first prediction that we want to talk about is that ransomware is going to continue to scale as it evolves. We know ransomware is important, we're seeing it, but it's going to continue to grow and scale. Alex, why don't you take that one on first?
Yeah, thank you, Jade. I think most people in business at this point know of ransomware. That's not a new concept. It is tearing through companies and costing millions of dollars for each ransomware attack. But it's interesting to really look at what I think is going to change this year in ransomware a little bit. We started to see changes last year. It's evolving. So at the end of the day, remember that ransomware is about extortion of money. It's not about encrypting your systems. Encryption of your data just seems to be one of the ways that gets people to pay money, right? So this is really an extortion campaign. And originally we saw hackers log in and encrypt your drives and then demand that you pay a ransom to get the decryption key. But that quickly evolved to, we've decrypted your drives and we've stolen your data. So if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to release that data publicly, which can really cause challenges for companies in terms of reputational damage or fines from governments for releasing private information, et cetera. Then it evolved to, if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to also DDoS attack you, distributed denial of service. So that was another incentive to try to get people to pay the money. And what I think we're going to start seeing some this year is we've logged in and now randomly changed some of your data, and you don't know what data we've changed. So imagine you're a hospital and all of a sudden you have an operational patient record system, but some of those patient records might be modified and you don't know which ones unless you pay the ransom to find out what was changed. Like, that's frightening kind of a concept. So ransomware is going to continue to evolve over time. We're also seeing that it's interesting to watch the hacker community if they have separation of duties now. So ransomware is as a service. You can literally go to a website in the dark web and pay a fee to get access to a ransomware campaign, where one type of hacker has written the ransomware code, another type of hacker has marketed that code in these ransomware campaigns, another type of hacker collects all the targets that someone could go after and publishes those for a fee, and then another type of hackers, more red team, they'll come in once you've compromised an environment and dig deep and try to dig out issues in the company. So there's this really sophisticated, organized separation of duties in the hacker community that has caused ransomware in particular to become easier to consume for the average newbie hacker, and more threat to all the end user customers out there who are the result of this. Some of the providers like DarkSide and Ryals are good examples where they've franchised ransomware as a service. It's really, really frightening when you start to think about it. Brad, do you have any other thoughts on ransomware this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing that is very interesting to see is the technology shift that's going on in ransomware. So a campaign that's very active right now is ransomware called Black Cat. And Black Cat is a piece of ransomware written in a programming language called Rust. And Rust is a formal methods programming language. That's the same kind of language that NASA would use for deep space probes, because it uses formal methods. It has no memory leakage. It's got all kinds of other code protection and things like that built into it. So the ransomware itself is now being built with formal method technologies, which is extremely expensive to do, very laborious, very challenging. They're building it. And then it also is a native executable, so it's wicked fast. Right. And we're seeing that and other programming languages like Go being used to accelerate and add sophistication as well as counterforensics to the malware itself. So if you think about this from a, am I investing? Are they investing? The bad guys are investing a tremendous amount in creating this malware technology that you are fighting against. If you're not investing in technology to fend them off, you are fighting an even worse asymmetric battle where you're on the losing side.
You know, Alex, you touched on DDoS attacks in that first prediction, but we actually have that as our second prediction, and I wanted you to go over that in a little bit more detail, because we're seeing that those are going to continue to scale up.
Yeah, last year we saw some of the largest DDoS attacks in history, and I think that's going to continue this year. So a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service attack, is basically when a hacker is able to take over a botnet army, which is just a collection of thousands, tens of thousands sometimes, IoT devices that are compromisable. Oftentimes they're video surveillance cameras or sensors that go on top of traffic lights in cities. You know, there's lots of types of IoT devices, and many of them have security as the last priority in the IoT device. So they're easy to compromise oftentimes, and these hackers will take them over and then lock the owner out, and then they'll use those devices to send data traffic to one target. And if you have tens of thousands of devices sending packets of data to your web server all at the same time, your web server becomes unavailable to your customers and your employees. That's a DDoS attack. And we saw some of the largest ever last year. And we're going to continue to see that play out this year in a similar way, because as we talked about in the last prediction around ransomware, DDoS is a great threat to get people to pay you money. Once again, it's all about extortion. So oftentimes a DDoS attack can result in you being down for 2 or 3 days, potentially, while you recover from that. So there's a lot of services that can prevent a DDoS attack or attempt to, but it depends on the size and scale of the attack as to whether the particular service you're paying for will actually be effective. So companies have to be thoughtful about what kind of DDoS mitigation strategy they have and how they're going to how they're going to leverage that. But I do believe this year we're going to continue to see large scale DDoS attacks as more botnet armies are created this year.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look at the amount of expansion of zombies that will have occurred as a result of the largest, most significant breach in the last 40 years, which is called Log4j. So any Java-based product, for example, uses Log4j, which is a logging utility, but it has had a vulnerability since literally the beginning of time, apparently. And therefore, it is easy to compromise billions of devices and a whole bunch of really big iron systems that are running out there on the internet. So that's created a giant land rush for all of these new things that can be used to attack you. So Alex's point is really important, because if you think about it, I think a lot of the business buyers out there are thinking, okay, I can buy myself a denial of service shield and I should be fine. And the answer is no, you're not. If they outscale you and they outscale the provider that's protecting you, it doesn't matter that you have a shield, you're still offline. So you're going to have to think more creatively and more intelligently about how you're doing your DDoS or your anti-DDoS strategy, which is really about how you a resilient mindset for your DMZ assets. So it's not only that shield, but it's also how you have constructed your infrastructure to be resilient. And so just if you were wondering whether or not you should do something about it, the largest breach in the last 40 years, compromising billions of devices, has easily turned a whole bunch of them into zombies ready to attack you. You are not ready. You need to do something about it before the attack happens, because I assure you, you're not going to be able to do very much to protect yourself after the denial of service starts.
Yeah, this Log4j thing is a real scary attack vector. We might even think about doing a podcast on that at some point, just to dive into the details. But it is going to be problematic because, number one, it's hard to know which applications you have in your environment that are necessarily vulnerable and which ones aren't. And then protecting against that attack is going to take significant time. My best recommendation in the short term is to apply application patches as soon as your Java-based vendor releases them, because most of them are working on some type of a patch. So make sure that you're on top of that as quickly as you can.
And firmware on devices, et cetera, et cetera. This patching, again, one of the basics of cybersecurity, goes right to the forefront of your defensive strategy.
All right, let's move on to prediction number 3. It's probably no surprise we're going to see a large cyber skills shortage. I think there's like 2.72 million unfilled cyber jobs at the end of 2021. Brett, why don't you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we've known about the cybersecurity skills gap for quite some time. It was really bad. And I say was really bad because it's gotten 100 times worse easily. So let's just laughably say that if we were at 100% at cybersecurity in the beginning of 2019, my guess is we're about 15% of our security postures now. So we have lost a tremendous amount of ground. Well, what caused that loss, right? So all of this lifting and shifting of the workforce, moving around, everybody's at work, everybody's at home now, people are returning office now, everybody's going home again. All of those shifts create seams in your cybersecurity defensive strategy. Your documentation, all these other things, your practices for how to defend your networks has probably fallen by the wayside. Then we've had dynamic forces like the Great Resignation. I'm sure you've heard about that. But there's now also the Great Termination, which is all of these companies that have been getting rid of employees because of a vaccine or not, right? And so this has created this huge shift of your experts, your good blue team experts, the people that you use to train your other people. They've left because they said, no, I don't want any part of this stuff. Either they were burned out or they were upset at your decision, right? And so because of that, everybody is sitting in a really, really bad spot. In fact, I would bet that the majority of the people listening in this podcast probably don't have a cybersecurity person anymore. They're probably running scared because they don't want to tell anyone, I'm running out there with literally no defenses whatsoever. But the thing is that it's normal. We must communicate with each other. You all have to understand everyone's in the same boat. There is this massive cybersecurity skills gap. It is evident that we are not producing competent cybersecurity professionals out of our educational establishments, our traditional educational establishments. And because of that, we're in a really bad spot because something has to change. So an example, TD SYNNEX has this new thing called Passage, which is going to be formally announced next week, as at the time of the recording of this podcast, where there are two parts to that. There is the placement, where we will bring new cyber talent into your organization. And then there is upskill, most important for our customers, our partners. And that is, if you have people, you can send them to us, we will upskill them and then give them back to you with a higher level of cybersecurity competency. So the Passage program has some profound data that enshrines it right around that, but suffice it to say, Tech Data SYNNEX is making a big impact on higher competency in cybersecurity, which is crucial for businesses these days, considering that we've fallen back down. If you think about this from a business perspective, what a great opportunity. What an unprecedented opportunity. If you can get up and run in cybersecurity and be competent and good at it, you are going to leapfrog all of your competition. While they're running the risk of being blown out of the water every day, you will literally be able to pick up huge amounts of market share because you have heavy concentrations of cybersecurity talent. And because of that, we're going to see all kinds of very interesting things in the cybersecurity world, right? If there is this huge cybersecurity skills gap, which is real, anyone that says it's not real, like, start reading. But then what do companies do? You're going to see mergers across companies and product lines where you say, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But if you look at who they're acquiring as far as cybersecurity talent in each other's organizations, it makes all the sense in the world. So we might actually start seeing mergers based on a simple fact of trying to acquire another organization's cybersecurity talent. That's how interesting and dynamic and crazy the cybersecurity world has become as a result of years of absolute chaos.
Yeah, I agree completely, Brett. I've had several friends reach out to me recently and say that they're looking for new opportunities. And when I start digging into why they're looking for new security opportunities, the most common answer I get is that they're just burned out. They're either CISOs at companies or they're security engineers at companies, and they're really struggling with the fact they're doing all-nighters trying to mitigate against attacks that are happening almost daily. It's just a never-ending job. And so a lot of it is because they're not given the tools it takes to automate a lot of what could be automated, and we're having to do things manually. And so my recommendation for you as a customer is make sure that you're investing in good security products and tools, and then giving your engineers training so that they can be prepared to use those tools effectively to reduce their workload and provide some automation so that they won't quit and leave. Now, the good news is for them, they're finding jobs like right away. Like if you have security in your background, it is pretty quick to find a new job, because as Jade mentioned earlier, there's 2.72 million unfilled jobs in cybersecurity right now globally. The good news here is there are a lot of kids out there who are coming out of high school, going into college, and they're thinking about this opportunity. Just in the last month, I've had 3 of my friends here where I live in Birmingham, Alabama, reach out and say their child is thinking of going into cybersecurity. It was 2 girls and 1 guy, actually, and they asked about having lunch with them and just talk about what is it like to be in the cybersecurity industry. And in fact, one of those lunches I have next week. So I love doing those, because young people who are interested in engineering fields and cybersecurity, I walk them through what does it take to gain those skills and how do you get into that space. We need more of them. We need fresh talent who thinks differently and is willing to approach the problem differently than someone who's been in this business a long time, because the game is changing. It changes every day. So we definitely have a shortage of cybersecurity skills, but this is an opportunity if you have kids out there to encourage them to go into the space, because the money's certainly good and the skill set's good, and it's a very rewarding industry.
Yeah, I'll just add that a good site where you can get statistics on the cyber skills shortage is cyberseek.org, and it kind of breaks it down into the different types of jobs. It's a really good site to check out. Tied in with this, because we're seeing this shortage, it kind of leads into prediction number 4, which is that companies will accelerate a shift to outsource cybersecurity. So Brett, why don't you touch on that one?
Yeah, so accepting the reality that everybody's sitting in, which is you don't have enough people with enough competency in cybersecurity. Now you have to pick your battles. find those third-party vendors that can help you offload the expertise your team may not have, and then refocus the team, whatever assets you have locally, if any, on the things that those third parties can't do for you. So MSSPs, huge plays here, ecosystem players and cybersecurity technologies, another great answer for you. All of these things are going to help you and your organization get back towards that, laughably 100% in the early of 2019, right? You're trying to regain the ground that you've lost. The way that you're going to accomplish it is you're going to leverage cybersecurity talent with other organizations, because again, you're not going to be able to find, acquire, and or keep your own cybersecurity talent. So you need to leverage third parties for that help. This is exactly where a TD SYNNEX partner can play a big role for you in helping you to connect with those competent cyber resources that you can then leverage for your organization. But it is very important to embrace the problem. Like in the military, they say embrace the suck, right? You have to say, okay, I'm not going to be able to find the talent that I need. I'm going to have to grow strategically. I'm going to have to grow incrementally, but I have problems I have to solve today, and that's where a third party is going to play a crucial role in that process.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I think outsourced providers are going to increase this year in security. Things like managed SOC, managed firewall, managed endpoint. But I would also say that just because outsourced cybersecurity is going to increase does not negate the need for companies to have some of their own security talent internally. And the reason is a lot of these companies that you outsource your security to, it's really a monitoring service, and they still rely on you to do some of the repair work, the remediation, if you will. So you can, in many cases, pay for the remediation also, but in some cases, you're going to need to have that capability internally. So thinking about strategies to take some of your existing staff, get them some training. Brett mentioned things like the Passages program that TD SYNNEX is investing in right now. It is one of many programs out there that's meant to take that person who's somewhat technically minded and upskill them into cybersecurity, because you're still going to need that to work with your outsourced provider who's going to do a lot of the work. The biggest benefit of an outsourced provider is they can take on a lot of the cost of having the big SIM solution, having some of the management tools and all those things that you don't necessarily as a customer want to have to invest and pay for. You can pay for that in a more of a subscription model through an outsourced provider. So I do think it's going to increase, but don't let that sway you from continuing to look for, hire, and build your own cyber talent as well.
That's a really critical point, Alex. I'm so glad you made that. Like, literally, you cannot substitute a third party for your own cybersecurity defense, because that third party is only able to see what your people and your technologies makes available for them to see. And no one cares about your business more than you and your people that are in that business. So no third party has the same skin in the game that you do. So it is crucial that you, as an organization, do whatever you can for yourselves and then cover what you can't do for yourselves with third parties. So Alex, thanks for making that point. It's really important.
All right, let's move on to prediction number 5. And it kind of was touched on a little bit earlier. Brett made a comment, but it's that security vendor consolidation will accelerate in 2022. So Alex, why don't you cover that?
Yeah, this one's pretty quick and easy, and probably no surprise to anyone. Over the last few years, we've seen the consolidation of security vendors. We're going to continue to see that this year. Last year, we had some really big consolidations. It was spread out between private equity, who's buying up security vendors like Thoma Bravo, STG just bought McAfee Enterprise as an example. And then you've got security vendors who are merging so that they can create larger portfolios of security products, because we're some years the pendulum swings toward companies want to buy best of breed of everything, and they've got 50 vendors in their environment. And then sometimes the pendulum swings the other way, where people want to buy portfolios where you can get more capability from fewer vendors. And right now we're in that area, that time period when people want to buy portfolios. They want fewer vendors with more capability, and that is creating a lot of M&A between the vendors. There's probably close to 2,500 security vendors globally in the market today. A lot of emerging startup vendors out there in the market with some really cool ideas. And so they're going to continue to get snatched up this year as this market evolves and grows, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, we are going to see an awful lot more chaos because the vendors that are offering cybersecurity products have the same problem you do. They're having trouble finding talent that's competent and able to do things. They're also, running lean in many areas that they shouldn't be running lean in. So consolidation makes all the sense in the world for everything that Alex said, but also acquiring cybersecurity talent. Why wouldn't company A acquire company B, which might be even in a totally unrelated business, because company B has a high competency cybersecurity team, and that's what they're really going after. And then they'll try to make the other stuff work. But the finding the talent and bringing the talent to you is a transformational thing going on in the business world today. And anyone who's intelligent about business is going to invest in cybersecurity, especially at this time.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit to prediction number 6, which is that attacks on cloud workloads will increase. Brett, why don't you kick that one off for us?
As we've seen, a lot of organizations have tried to offload some of the heavy IT stuff by putting stuff up in the cloud, and that's been very productive. I think a lot of companies are also coming to the reality that the cloud provider is interested in selling you access to servers. They're not necessarily interested in helping you secure them. And so because of that, there's a great deal of exposure that I think the buyer, the companies that bought that cloud service, thought they were getting, and are now realizing they didn't. And so because there is that gap, the bad guys know, and they're like, wow, this is a great place. They just put all their data up there. It's not as well protected as it was before. So I'm going after this cloud infrastructure to go get that data. We have been hearing and seeing a lot of that. It will absolutely continue. And the other side, the other dynamic to all of this stuff is the blue team, the people defending your network. They don't necessarily have the same visibility of your cloud infrastructure as they do their own infrastructure. And that's another gap that the bad guys can exploit because, what's going on in the other room is a little bit muffled to your team. And therefore, it's kind of harder for them to respond to stuff.
Yeah, that's a really insightful point, that the blue teamers are not necessarily trained to manage the cloud workloads like they are on premise. Another thought for me is, I think one of the biggest benefits to the hacker right now is how many cloud workloads are just completely misconfigured, which is crazy. But every week it seems like I read about an Amazon S3 storage bucket that's not configured right, and so it's easily publicly available on the internet. And hackers just have to scan for publicly available resources to then go steal your data. They don't even have to work for it. So that's not to say that cloud workloads are inherently insecure or can't be secure, but you have to secure them in the same way you think about securing your on-premise workloads. You need good identity and access management. You need good defense in depth concepts. You need a zero trust approach to how you secure the cloud, just like on-premise. So make sure that your cloud administrators have been given adequate training in not only configuring Azure or AWS or Google, but in securing those things. And that will prevent a lot of the low-hanging fruit for the hacker community.
Well, echoing just one more time, only you care about your own cybersecurity. The vendor that's selling you that, they kind of have an interest, but they really don't. You do. And so because of that, you need to be on top of your cybersecurity in your cloud, because who else will do it if you don't?
All right, let's move on for the sake of time to prediction number 7. It's the year of MFA and passwordless authentication. So multi-factor authentication is going to be huge this year. Alex, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I think that we've learned over the last many years that passwords are a horrible form of security, and primarily because of us as people. We tend to create easy to guess passwords that are short and easy to remember, and because of that, they're inherently insecure. Used to, we recommended that passwords were at least 8 characters to 10 characters, and they had uppercase and lowercase and all those things. But NIST has now moved away from that 10-year-old kind of methodology, and they now recommend your passwords be very long, 20 characters to 30 characters passphrases, because every character you add increases the entropy, which is the difficulty it is to guess a password for a computer system. So even though we're shifting the way we manage passwords, trying to make them more safe, it is still not a good practice. So we're starting to see a lot of the vendors out there develop strategies that are passwordless. Now, what do we mean by passwordless? That means biometrics, or that means tokens. So the old adage, you need multi-factor authentication, which is 2 or more of the following. It is something you know, that's like a password possibly, something you have, that's like a token you might get in an SMS text message to your phone or possibly to your authenticator app. Something you are, that's a biometric like an iris scan or a fingerprint scan, or somewhere you are, which is you would need to be in a certain geographic location in order to log into a system. If you have 2 or more of those things, then you are multi-factor authentication because each of those is a factor. And that's not to say that passwords can't play a role in your security moving forward as one factor of many, but they can't be just the only single factor anymore. This year, we're starting to see more and more application providers come out with more default settings that are passwordless, or at least offer password plus something else. And I'm excited about it. It is a little bit of an inconvenience for employees and customers to have to pull out your authenticator app and type in a code. But I tell you what, the downside of not doing that and possibly getting hacked, having your data stolen, getting a ransomware attack, which can cost millions to your company, it is absolutely worth the extra 10 seconds it takes to pull out your phone and enter a code. So I think this year we're going to continue to see the migration of things more to a passwordless approach with multi-factor.
Yeah, multi-factor is absolutely the way to go. I mean, one thing you can do is ask a cybersecurity professional, what do you do to protect yourself? Because cybersecurity professionals are hunted, right? All the countries of the world are trying to get them all the time. I literally rely on multi-factor authentication to protect the majority of everything that I do. If I didn't have it, it's very likely I would have already lost the war. So thankfully, it's not happened yet. And I believe it's unlikely to happen, but multi-factor authentication is another one of those things that you can do to transform your cybersecurity posture. So for example, Alex started off with this. We're really bad at protecting passwords. We hand off passwords to people we don't know. We enter passwords into sites we shouldn't enter them into. And we reuse passwords, even though we've been told for decades we shouldn't do that. So let's say that password that your users have, they've been compromised. Well, guess what? That doesn't matter, because if they don't have that person's phone, for example, which is the most people's conception of multi-factor authentication, then they don't have the two things in the same place at the same time. So it didn't matter that they were bad at password mitigation, because they can't make any use of that because they're lacking that second factor. It is transformational to have that. There are some technologies out there that add a totally new dynamic to the multi-factor authentication. It's maturing as a market, but the fact is you cannot fail to have multi-factor authentication. And if you have cyber insurance, you already know. They're telling you you don't get cyber insurance unless you have multi-factor on all your stuff. The industry is telling you, you better have this or we're not giving you insurance. So whatever your reason, you have to go to multi-factor authentication this year.
Let's go ahead and wrap this up for the sake of time. We actually had some additional predictions, and there's a lot more out there, as many of you could probably add your own list to this. So this is just some of our insights that we're seeing out there and trends that we're seeing. But it's important that we're all really taking this seriously and putting the right focus where it needs to be. So with that, we'll wrap this up and look forward to next month's podcast on 30 Minutes with a Hacker. Thanks, everyone.